Welcome to Operations and Supply Chain University. I'm Jerry Wright. This is lesson number 12, process mapping. So process mapping, it's a key tool for continuous improvement. In fact, it's the one I use probably the most. If we fully understand each step of the process and how it is performed, we can usually determine any problem areas and find a way to make the process better. The most common process mapping techniques or methods are drawing a flow chart on an easel or a whiteboard or using software on a computer, using post-it notes on a whiteboard or flip chart, or just recording a video or physically walking process. Sometimes we think of staple yourself to an order and follow the order all the way through the process. So here's a process mapping example. These are post-it notes on a whiteboard. There's an example of that with 21 process steps. That's pretty common. That's the one I think I've used the most. Here's one if you have to do it electronically. And again, I think process mapping electronically doesn't make a lot of sense until you're documenting your finished process flowchart and what you want to look like. But if you had to do it virtually, you're on Zoom or Teams or another web-based service and you're trying to share things, doing a process map in PowerPoint, Visio, Excel, whatever makes sense for you is another way to go. Now let's look at an example that I did a number of years ago. This is a complaints process, and we mapped it out. You can see with post-it notes on a dry erase board and the little arrows. In this current state process, the owner said, hey, I want to improve my process. I don't want to hire somebody to manage this, but we're just taking way too long to process complaints. And I said, great, we'll get together. We'll do a Kaizen event. It took us about 6-7 hours. And we did the process. And if you notice here from this particular process mapping example, the current process is 31 steps. It takes over 120 days in most cases, and over 6 people are involved, sometimes 7, but typically 6. So I said, hey, let's look at all these different process steps and which ones could we eliminate because they're really non-value added. And the team jumped right in. They said, oh my gosh, there's too many non-value added steps. We could eliminate these 4. And if you notice, there's 31 steps. The goal was to try to get to 16 steps or less. So I went out of the room for a few minutes and my co-facilitator was helping. And I came back and they'd pulled the screen down over their solution. And I said, hey guys, what's going on? They said, wait for it. Wait for it. Ta-da. And this was their solution. They'd spent time looking at, the way the FDA expected complaints to be reported. They talked to their friends at other companies. They realized there was a lot of non-value added actions. And now the new process is just 6 steps for non-reportable and 8 steps for reportable complaints. Now they summarized the entire process. And again, this took about a day to complete. And if you notice, the lead time went from 120 days to 10. The number of people involved went from 6 to just 2, and then the number of steps or touches went from 31 to 8, less than half of what we were targeting of 16 steps, which would have been half of 31. And then the overall average improvement, 78%. That's huge. Plus, if you noted down below, they didn't hire an assistant to manage a process that they could make better. So again, I love this example. I think it's a great one. And this is pretty common to see improvements in administrative areas in the 70 to 80% range. It's not uncommon. And process mapping is a great technique. Just make sure everybody's there and we all agree on what the process is. Now, once you determine what it is and how you currently do it, and that's why you have to have the process experts and the process owners there, then you identify before state and say, okay, what's our current lead time? How long does it take? How long does it take to do the work? What the cycle time is? What's our distance traveled if it's a physical movement? How many steps or touches are there? How many people are involved? How many forms or emails or paperwork involved? Then think about which steps are non-value added or waste and can be reduced or preferably eliminated. Here's another quick example. This was done in a virtual format. So this was a label request process map. Pretty simple, only a handful of steps. So we begin with the label request, which involves printing the label request form, completing it in permanent pen, blue or black ink only, Take the form to label controller, place in the bin outside the door. Then, are the labels ready? Yes, great. If not, then we go back to label control when they are ready. It's a lot of walking, you can imagine. Then the labels are delivered to our drop-off location. We check the labels, and if they're good, we use them. If not, we've got to go all the way back to label control. So in this particular example, we identified 5 areas that were all wasteful and should be basically reduced or eliminated if possible. Now, some things are easy to adjust, but the reality in this particular area is if we were willing to make a big change, we should actually just give the label printer to the people doing the labor requests and let them print their own labels. As long as they have a template or a guide or programming is done, we could eliminate probably all but 3 steps. I need labels, I print labels, I check them to make sure they're good, and then I can use them. That's 4 steps instead of what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So almost half. But again, that's another example of a process mapping. And you can do this virtually or in a training room or wherever it makes sense. So process mapping lessons learned. This is important. Process mapping is very, very simple, but it must be done with the people who actually do the process. The reason I say that is I've sat through process mapping sessions where somebody says, oh, we do this, and then the person who actually does it on a regular basis says, no, we don't do that anymore, or yeah, we still do that, and the manager or the supervisor going, wait, I thought we eliminated that. No, we still have to do it. IT made a change or whatever the case may be. Now, once you've got the map up, we ask why as many times as needed. So we're back to our 5 whys to determine, do we really need this step or not? Let me back up. Do we really need to print the label request form? Can't we just actually send a message and then they print it for us and deliver it? So again, that'd be an example. So ask why on every step and see if you can eliminate that step. Don't waste time making fancy process maps. Process mapping is a learning process to help everybody see the whole process as it actually is done today. I say do them on dry erase boards, use Post-it notes because then you can move the Post-it notes around or take them off. And then you can erase arrows if you're on a dry erase board. That works well. Now, the other thing that's important is process owners have to be involved. So the supervisor for the label printing as an example, or the manager for an area, or the supervisor for an area. They need to be involved because otherwise you're wasting your time. The process owners have to own the outcome and establish the changes required. Otherwise you're wasting your time and effort. It's what I call pushing a rope. Pushing a rope doesn't do very much. You need to pull on the rope to get things done. All right, that's it for process mapping. If you want to learn more about metrics-based process mapping, and this is good for any process, my good friends and fellow consultants, colleagues Karen Martin and Mike Osterling wrote a book called Metrics-Based Process Mapping. It's a great book and a great reference if you want to learn more about process mapping. All right, that's it for this lesson. Thank you.